I will just say I was doing my taxes this weekend, and this is the first time most of us are doing that anybody's doing taxes under the new laws. And there are a lot of things that have changed, particularly if you live in one of the SALT states. What do you think? How are things going so far, just overall, with the tax income that's coming in?
Yeah, we threw a lot of changes to everyone, whether you're a business or an individual. So this first year, there's going to be a lot of that confusion here. But I think in the long run, you've got about 93% of Americans who are going to be filing on the shortest possible tax form that we have. It is going to simplify a lot of that. And for states like high tax states and those who are higher income that have been caught up in the AMT before, that's gone for most families. So 4.5 million families won't be doing a second run at their taxes, which we think's helpful as well.
You do have in the SALT states, though, a big issue about, you're right, they're high tax states. These are taxes that used to be able to write off against your federal taxes. Real estate taxes in particular are high in a New Jersey, a New York, a Connecticut. And there have been some studies that have shown it's actually impacted property values in those states.
Well, it may have, but look, these are fantastic states, by the way. New York, New Jersey, Illinois, California, fantastic states. But the taxes are brutally high, and they're far above what other states are taxing. And as a result, new study, I think New York has lost about $100 billion in revenue and wealth because of the high taxes over the last 20 years. It makes it very tough for families and especially millennials to be able to live in these states. Now, so I think at the end of the day, I think these states are going to have to tackle their tax codes to stay competitive. I know Governor Christie, I think you threaten a veto every week on a new tax increase in New Jersey. I think it was just relentless on you to continue to do that. But under the new tax code, the curtain's been pulled back. Now families and businesses know exactly how they're being taxed at the state and local level. And over time, states won't be able to compete unless they make some changes.
Governor, what would you do if you were in office right now, if you were still running New Jersey?
The same thing that I was doing when I was there for 8 years, which was to veto tax increases and to put a property tax cap on New Jersey. And it's one of those few things that actually works. Now it's been 9 years in a row where property taxes have not gone up more than 2% a year in New Jersey in any particular year over the last 9. When I became governor, they'd gone up 70% in 10 years.
But a situation like this, like even limiting increases, is probably not going to deal with the changes that have now been dropped on the state.
No, and here's the problem. I now have a successor who's going to announce his budget tomorrow, and he will announce more tax increases, and is completely tone deaf to the idea of what's happening at the federal level. By the way, when I ran for president, I advocated exactly what Congressman did in this bill, which was to get rid of SALT, because it's the only way to force these other states to get with it in terms of stopping to increasing taxes at an unsustainable rate. It wasn't very popular for me to advocate for that in my state, but the fact of the matter is we were holding holding taxes level where I was, even dropped the sales tax and a couple of other things that'll help working class folks. But these states are going to have to come to grips with this, Becky, because otherwise what they're going to do is people who are mobile, who are usually the folks who make the most money, will leave and go other places. And that's why you see New York losing so much money. And New Jersey, by the way, projected 7.5% tax growth this year, Congressman. You know what they're getting? 1.25%.
Yeah.
You haven't seen any of those states do that to this point. It's only been a year and 3 months.
No, well, because you have in all those states, you now have Democratic governors, right? In every one of those states that we're talking about, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Illinois, California, you have liberal, progressive, Democratic governors who are saying nothing wrong with higher taxes. But here's the deal. In New Jersey, they raised taxes last year in order to try to get more growth in the budget. They projected 7.5%. They're getting 1.25% growth. They're going to come real to the fact that it's not the way to grow revenue in New Jersey or grow jobs.
And Becky, to the governor's point, look, the average, the increase in state revenues is about 8% higher, and a lot of the medium and lower tax states are actually sharing that windfall with taxpayers. So they're getting more revenue because of economic growth. Look, New York, New Jersey, California, these are great economic engines. Their revenues are going up, just not as much as expected. And the challenge is, for 20 years, people have been moving, walking. Now the millennials are starting to leave New York, New Jersey, California, Illinois at the greatest numbers. It's just not livable for them. So look, change is coming to keep these states competitive.
You used to talk about tax cut 2.0, but that was before the Democrats took control of the House. What do you think now when you start hearing some of the tax plans that are being talked about? by a lot of people who are running for president or people who are new to Congress who have come in. What happens now?
Yeah, so look, 2.0 is about changing the culture in Washington. So we don't wait 30 years to reform the tax code. We make it better every year. So making individual and the small business cuts permanent, doing more on retirement savings than more on innovation. We've seen just a surge in new business startups. That's really encouraging. So I think the permanence, obviously, with Democrats is off the table right now, but the others not so much. I actually think there's some bipartisan support for helping more businesses offer retirement savings plans, letting people or encouraging them to save more and earlier in their life. I think we'll do some more on innovation. So part of 2.0, I think, will ultimately make it to the president's desk. On the other hand, the Democrat, look, I haven't seen a tax policy proposal that makes sense on the Democrat side for president. It's like they're picking a cartoon villain, you know, the billionaires, whoever it is, and writing a tax policy plan to it. That's not how we're going to get more growth. The real question here, if I were running for president on economics, there'd be two issues. Now that we have a new tax code, we need more customers. That's trade, and this is what I do differently. And we need more workers, and this is what I would do in that area, because I think workforce is the great governor pushing down on the growth in the United States.
These plans that are being discussed right now are being discussed by Democrats who do control the House, but they don't control the Senate. They don't have the presidency right now. Do you think any of these things actually get done, potentially? Or
no.
Would this take a completely Democratic House on a Democratic Senate, Democratic president, and then?
Yeah, I think it's so how far to the left can they go in this presidential campaign? I think you'll see even more of that. But I still think at the end of the day, trade and more workforce is what can really drive this economy.
Now, you were, during the whole tax cut debate, you were among those advocating for perhaps some revenue offsets, some other provisions out there that wouldn't make it completely, just kind of a lower revenue strategy. Now, people said growth is going to make up the difference. Doesn't seem to be happening, at least in the current deficit or the one projected. Is that okay? Because you're actually starting to see people on both sides of the aisle saying, maybe the deficit is not necessarily crowding anything else out.
So I think, look, we made a pretty modest investment, $1.5 trillion over a decade for a brand new tax code. Individual and payroll tax revenue is up pretty significantly in Washington. Corporate taxes, is not. But this is, I think, a very small investment overall to leapfrog us back into competitiveness on the world stage. Secondly, to bring those dollars back home. I still think the best is yet to come on tax reform, because so much of what we redesigned was for the long term, to change the location decisions for business. Where do I put that manufacturing plant, that headquarters, that R&D? Secondly, that the full and unlimited expensing didn't just drive what people here buy more. What we said was invest in the productivity of your workers. The other point I'll finish here is I was in Dallas again at the end of the week. Look, the number of projects and development that is come off the shelf is now in development. I think will take several years to manifest itself, but I still think this is the best is yet to come as far as growth.
I don't think it was sold by its advocates as a small investment. 1.3 trillion, people were crowing it's the biggest tax cut in history.
Well, but overall, look, if you look at adding $2 trillion in national debt in 1 year, which is what President Obama did on the spending side of it, this was a pretty modest side on the supply side of the economy, and Lord knows we needed a different tax.
And if you don't think it, by the way, if you don't think that location decisions are made by taxes, and Congress was talking about in terms of foreign money and foreign money coming back to the shores, look at what happened with Amazon HQ2. So with Amazon HQ2, the only reason they came to New York and that it was viable was because of the huge tax incentives that were given by the state of New York. And they left when those tax incentives were put in jeopardy. They may have come to New Jersey because we offered even more in tax incentives, but then they put Phil Murphy in as governor, who immediately started talking about raising taxes and calling into question the idea of tax incentives. So, I've had somebody say, well, now that they left, New York, will they come to New Jersey? Not with this governor, they won't. They won't come to New Jersey because they know that their workers will be taxed to a point that it's not affordable any longer, and they're just calling tax incentives into question.
Congressman, just wanted to ask a little bit about the tax on the wealthy issue more broadly. Are there any subsectors that you've heard that you actually agree with, whether it's a capital gains tax, a buybacks tax, a higher income tax, or a wealth tax, or do you disagree with all of those progressive?
Generally disagree. One, the wealthy in America pay an outsized share of the burden on taxes. We have a very progressive tax code, and it's only become, under the new tax laws, even slightly more progressive. In fact, that the wealthiest that used to shoulder about 19% of the tax burden now will shoulder about 20%. So we certainly did not drive more cuts to the wealthy side at all. I do think this focus on stock buybacks is a mistake. Look, what's wrong with a company bringing dollars back from overseas, investing it in the U.S., including in themselves and their shareholders? And at the end of the day, one, that's good for the economy, but two, those of us who invest in these companies now can use those dollars either for ourselves or for new investments. And so I think that's a wrong-headed approach.
Congressman, let me ask you really quickly. I've never seen a major piece of legislation put into play that didn't have unintended consequences. What's one of the biggest unintended consequences you've seen after seeing this put into place?
On the tax code?
Yeah.
I think I've been stunned at how Americans have become sort of disconnected to their paycheck. It was really tough to get people to compare last year's taxes to this year's tax, even to be able to look at their monthly paycheck, because we don't get them, we don't see them as we used to do, and so
because of direct deposit.
Absolutely, and so the education side of that, I realized in my own town hall meetings, just in general, it really was tough getting people to be able to compare. It's not as easy as it used to be.
And that's related to people being complaining they're not getting as big a refund.
Because this was designed. Look, most families live paycheck to paycheck,
exactly.
And so you wanted that money last year, not delayed a year. So that's what it was designed to do. But I think it was hard. People probably didn't notice it was there.